Recording. All right, so we'll just get straight into it. I'll start with the first bill, the first part of the financial code update. So Ashna is not here, but Keshav, do you have some information about these?
Yeah, so Ashna's not here because she's in the final, but I'll be kind of like talking to her points for all the bills. So as we hear them, I'll kind of like present her side of them.
Okay, so yeah, we'll start with 11, 102.11. Keshav, if you want to go ahead and
yeah, let me pull it up. Give me one.
I can share it. Or share the
yes,
screen,
please.
if that's easiest. All right.
Yeah, so basically, before we hop into the specific bills, an overview of what we're trying to do with the changing the finance code is we wanted to, there are a lot of things in the code that are either outdated, no longer allowed by university, or just need to be stricter due to just like super like lax regulations in the past over like what kind of money can be spent, what kind of things need to go through certain committees and stuff. And so me, Ashna, and Bobby, and Lamar a little bit too, sat down a few weeks ago and just went through the entire title and like changed things that we thought like should be fixed or needed to be fixed. And so it's broken up in 5 different bills. Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 6, I believe. I don't think 5 needed any changes. But yeah, so this is the first of this. This is chapter 1. And so the only change that's happening here, just like the technical change, we had to include university-sponsored organizations as well because both branches of student government also receive funding from finance committee, and we're technically USOs. So that was just like a small little thing. If you scroll down back, I think that should be it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Yes, it's a very like small technical change. Like there's no real controversy around it, I guess.
I have a question just about background. Like, is there a fundamental difference between an RSO and a USO?
Yes, so RSOs are student created. USOs are like required to exist by the university. So a USO is like student television or WXYC or student government. RSO is like my dance team or like some things like that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Take other discussion or motions on the bill, or questions, I guess we're in, or motions.
I guess if there's no other questions, motion to report without prejudice.
Okay, there's been a motion to report without prejudice. We always could report favorably if we want, given that this is a small change.
Would reporting it favorably, it would report just this bill, right? Not all of them, right?
Right.
Okay, I'll actually change it to a motion to report this one favorably since it's just a small technical change.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this is being reported favorably. I'll update that later. Okay, chapter 2.
All right, so there are some more significant changes in this part of the bill. So what we wanted to do was we know that the funding portal happens pretty early on in the semester, or it has happened for like the past few years. And so we wanted to give clubs an opportunity to, if they missed that first funding portal, to still be able to submit a request in the second opportunity, but there'd be less funding available in that funding portal. And so what we're doing here is we're kind of rewriting these definitions where subsequent appropriations is what we know now to be like the typical funding process. Secondary subsequent is another cycle that'll open up as soon as the primary one closes for for each semester, in which there will be a smaller amount of money available for clubs who weren't able to apply in that first cycle. This is one change Ashna wanted me to bring up in R&J, but I'll get to it once I'm done explaining. So let me just pull it up real quick. Okay. Yeah. And then summer is just, so terminal originally meant summer, but it just like wasn't clear that like that's like what it was supposed to mean. And so we just changed the word terminal to summer just to clarify it for everyone, like for like students reading that. And it's just a $4,000 budget for organizations that are still on campus over the summer that provide programming for students who are also on campus over the summer. And so that's solely for the summer. And then we added a fourth stipulation at the bottom there because we wanted to have some flexibility, like because we included that secondary appropriations would begin no later than 9 weeks into the fall semester, but like obviously like if something happens like COVID again, or if that water pipeline bursts like it did freshman year, or at least my freshman year, or things like that, then like we wanted to include a stipulation that would allow us to like adjust the timelines to these in the case of emergencies. Yeah, so that is the reasoning behind that. And then Ashna wanted to add in the code that clubs wouldn't be able to apply to both the primary and secondary subsequent appropriations because the whole purpose of the secondary one is to give clubs who weren't able to apply to the first one a chance to still apply. And then we also wanted to make sure that clubs who already applied to the first one weren't like coming back in the second one, like trying to request even more money for the same semester. So yeah, and then back to if you scroll down a little bit. Yeah, so for viewpoint neutrality, viewpoint neutrality was something that the finance committee really struggled to maintain because this paragraph was like not like the most specific, and it's often like a little bit overlooked. And so we just added a stipulation there that viewpoint neutrality, like all like the specifics of what that entails, will be included in a guide that the finance chair will create this year. So Ashna will be the first to create it, and then will be like slightly updated / modified each year to like as accordingly, to really hone in on the idea of what is neutrality, like how to obtain viewpoint neutrality when hearing funding requests, and how to be like as impartial as possible. Because like an example of what would happen sometimes is a club would come in with like a $200 funding request, and then another club would come in with like a $2,000 funding request. The club with the $200 request would often just get like all their money automatically approved because the amount was so low, and the club with the higher request would like be like looked at more stringently. But the problem with that is that even if the amount of money that your club requests is technically low, you can there could still be money in there that can like that isn't necessary, or that like they're like not allowed to request funding for. And so they violated viewpoint neutrality because people would like see like the lower budget amount and be like more willing to just like kind of pass it off, because those dollars do add up, and there could still be violations in whatever they're requesting. Prepayments, we got rid of that because the university doesn't allow that anymore. Scroll down. Yeah, and then the FCC is sitting on SFAS, TFAT. The finance committee chair can no longer sits on those. Like they're just like not on those committees, and so that's just like outdated. And we had a question come up in finance when this bill was heard last week about getting rid of F, because then they were like, well, does that mean that the finance committee chair couldn't attend TFAT even if the SVP requested? Those meetings, like they invite people to speak to certain things as needed. And so like, we don't need to specifically codify that the SVP can request them to come in, because the committee can request people to come in regardless. And so that it doesn't change anything. So yeah, if you scroll down further, oh, wait, no, I think that's it, right?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. Okay. So Ashna requested that you all add in some sort of language that specifies that clubs can't apply to both cycles. Maybe that language might come in a later bill or like a later chapter. But you could also just like, include it in the definition for secondary appropriations and be like, clubs who have applied, this cycle shall only be available for clubs who have not applied to the primary appropriation cycle. But that's like her recommendation. Obviously, it's up to you all to determine like if that's something that you want to pursue or like you think is worth adding.
Could I was thinking like that makes a lot of sense that they shouldn't be able to get money in both cycles, but clubs that are denied funding or get like a very denied funding the first round, and I feel like they should probably be able to try again with better. I don't know exactly how, because I don't know how often things are approved or not approved.
So no club is like outright denied funding. If you submit your thing within the portal, then your request is still heard, and you'll get like some funding. But I think what you're talking about is like the purpose of this bill. Like, if a club it just misses that portal or like isn't able to get any funding, or not if they're not able to get any, but like if their request isn't able to be heard the first time around, like the secondary part is like for those clubs specifically. It's made for those clubs. So like let's say that like your club wants to apply for funding.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, sorry. You were kind of freezing up a little bit, so I wasn't sure.
So in committee right now, can we put in language without the sponsor of the bill being here?
I believe you can, right, Baxter?
My opinion on that is that it would work the same way it would if the primary sponsor ruled it unfavorable, where it's just a vote of the committee, a majority vote of the committee.
So you all would have to vote on it. Like it wouldn't be a friendly amendment.
Right.
Okay. So we would vote on it in committee, or would we vote on it in fulls? Okay. I definitely I don't know specifically like what language we would put it or where we would put it within there, but I'm in favor of putting in language to ensure that like you're not applying for both funding cycles, because I think that can really detract from like funding opportunities for a diverse range of student organizations.
Yeah, my question about that would be whether we wanted to say, if we wanted to say that the secondary shouldn't be open to, should not be open to clubs that received money instead of just applied, just in case some club does get rejected outright, or apply for something that wasn't eligible. That would give them a chance to.
Yeah, I think that would work good.
Yeah,
anyone who gets money shouldn't be able to get money for a second round.
Yeah. I see what you're saying though. I don't know, like personally, I don't know where I'm at, because it would depend, I guess, contextually, like why were they denied in the first place, whether it was on just like they didn't do something correct in an application or they missed a certain deadline, or it was literally just like it was just decided not to. I don't know what's like best, whether we put just if you've applied and didn't get it in the first place, or you applied and got it, like don't apply. I definitely think if they applied and got money, then we should close the secondary subsequent appropriation cycle to them. But I'm not sure about the point of like if they applied the first cycle and didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree with what Colin is saying, because like I can imagine like a situation in which a club requests for money and their entire request is like just for food. Or actually, but in that case, then maybe they would come back the second time and be like, okay, like we're like requesting money for something else because we didn't realize.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. They like figured out that what they were doing initially was just like a bad idea or just didn't fit, I guess, whatever credentials were needed. And then the second time they like get their act together or like figure out exactly what kind of stuff they need to ask for and why.
Do you think that might create like a lot of backlog in it though? Because if it's, I mean, for me, it's kind of like, I think if you're applying for funding, if we're like updating the finance code to be pretty clear and as like, I guess, lack of better words, user friendly as we can the first time, like if they just don't follow those guidelines in the first place, do we want to not like risk? I just like I'm afraid of backlogging, like if they do it a second time and just taking up space. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of my concern with that.
That's a fair concern. I'll also say that every organization's treasurer will go through a training in which like it'll specifically outline what you can and cannot request funding for in the first place. And so technically speaking, they should already be aware of that. Like then the way the training is going to be set up, it'll be a test in which it's a multiple choice answer test, and each question is presented one at a time. And if the person taking the test enters the wrong answer, then hits next, it'll prompt them and be like, no, like the answer you entered was incorrect. Here's the correct answer and here's why. And then it'll force them to go back and then choose the right answer. So like, and make sure that like they're like actually paying attention to like what the right answer is and that like they know the stuff. So technically speaking, they would know what they're applying for and what they cannot apply for. And it could generate backlog. Like if we like hear too many things, because keep in mind also like it would be a lot of the finance committee has to meet physically in person to hear these requests, and so that's more meetings on us. But it again, like there's two sides to it. So
I'm still not clear on how many clubs, so maybe you don't know, Keshav, how many clubs get outright denied where they don't get any money.
I don't think any club. I could actually look it up. Let me see. As to my knowledge, I've never heard of a club getting outright denied, or just like being nothing. But I can check right now.
Yeah, I guess too, when I think about it, like if they have kind of what Keshav was describing, the process of like a test for the treasurer of the organization in the first place, to me, it's kind of like if they take that test and still for some reason submit a request that gets denied just because of like technical reasons, would allowing them to go a second time be productive? And or like, does that almost, I feel like to some extent, risk going against like the discretion of the finance committee? Like it almost to me, I don't know if this is like thinking about it too much, but it almost seems like it would place it on the fault of the finance committee that they did something wrong in the first place if we've made it pretty clear beforehand like what that process should look like.
I agree with you, Colin. Like it does seem like it would kind of cause like a backlog. The one thing I have like it would like, suppose the finance committee's discretion, they say like this club X is just not going to get any funding for maybe reasons. At the end of the day, we still want to provide like the opportunity for all the clubs, like the maximum amount of the clubs to have like the funding they need to operate. So even if they did, like, even if they took the test and they still didn't get funding, which is like what Keshav's saying, that doesn't really happen all that often anyway. If that happens, like, I feel like it'd be good to have just a little thing in there, like they still have a chance to get funding. And since this is going to be like a super small number of cases anyway, like Keshav said, there's like none that he can think of. So I'm assuming the backlog wouldn't be terribly high anyways, to just have that in there just in case, like as like a all else fails kind of thing.
Yeah, so I just checked. Last year in the spring, there were only 2 to 3 clubs that got $0 outright, and so Jay made an accurate point. Like, it's not that many clubs in the first place. So I don't think backlog should be an issue that we're worried about.
Is there like a reason listed why they weren't given funding?
I can't see that for, unfortunately. Like, they don't put those notes in the portal I'm looking at.
Okay, cool.
Ashton's unfortunately in the final right now, otherwise she'd be able to speak to this. I think we should be good for now going either way. And then if we just put it on general orders, we can have like Ashna talk more about it in like full Senate. And then like if like a small change needs to be made, then we can just make the full Senate with the friendly amendment. So I don't think we should be too concerned about which way we go now, as long as there is some language in there.
Okay. Anybody want to propose a motion or propose an amendment to incorporate that?
Also, by the way, I can't propose motions or amendments, so.
Yeah, I think that I'd be more comfortable doing it, just placing this on general orders and then doing an amendment when Ashna is present to speak to like that, what she sees that as an issue or not.
I agree with that. I think we should have Ashna speak to it. I think that'd be good.
Okay. So then I guess motion to report without prejudice, if that would place it on general orders. Okay, yeah, motion to report.
I have a couple of other questions. If
Okay.
you're willing to withdraw your motion.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion for a second. Go ahead.
So, Keshav, is this thing about university emergency situations, is that a technical term, or is that actually defined somewhere or declared
I
by
don't think it
something?
is, so maybe you can like not capitalize it.
So I was just gonna change it to like in case of emergency,
Oh yeah, that works.
and then presumably the question of is it an emergency would be similar to any other emergency power where it'd be like reviewable by the court or
You can just at like the discretion of the finance chair or like finance committee, I guess. I think that should work, right?
I'm fine with leaving it as in case of emergency, just so that it's not like arbitrary.
Okay, that works too.
So then, sorry, when I motioned earlier, I definitely forgot there was like more than just what we were talking about, so it's my bad. But I have a similar question talking about that, like looking into that, like if that's not a specifically defined thing, like what an emergency situation constitutes. I do have questions about like whose discretion it is to decide to, would it be like finance chair or finance committee to decide disbursement cycles changing?
Yeah, it would be like it would essentially be the finance chair and the student government advisor and the speaker, those three. I wouldn't be too concerned about not having it codified, but if that is a concern that we have, then we can codify it. There's no problem with that.
Okay.
I would imagine / hope that the finance chair, national advisor, and speaker would get together and change that.
Yeah.
I moved.
Sorry. Go ahead. No, I was gonna say I'm not sure where I sit on like it being codified or not. So I don't have like one way or the other at the moment, but
I'll move to amend number 4 to say disbursement cycles could be adjusted by the finance chair in case of emergency.
I second that.
So do we want to debate that or go to a vote?
I'm good with that.
Okay. All those in favor of adopting that amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
I do have another question about the bill in general that you might be able to speak to, Keshav, with the viewpoint neutrality piece. When developing a guide for funding criteria, is that placed solely upon the responsibility of the finance chair? Is the finance chair collaborating with someone like an external office like dean of students to have kind of that criteria, have multiple lenses of like equity and things like that?
So it's actually, I think FC stands for finance committee. So it'd be the committee as a whole.
Okay.
Yeah, I misread that. So I think having those that body of students should suffice. But again, like if that's a concern that you have, then we can definitely look at like bringing in someone else. But I would imagine that it should be okay. Yeah, I think because the thing is like we'll be making it this session. Sorry, one sec. Yeah, so we'll be the ones creating in this session in the first place, and Bobby is the one that will be helping us make it. And so in future years, it'll only be like slightly modified / updated. So I wouldn't be concerned, especially with like a group of students in the finance committee itself. So I think we're good.
Yeah, my question about that was that I think it's this one. They have the priorities for funding, which is already part of the code. And so my question was whether that guide is supposed to just kind of restate that in a way that's more accessible to students applying for funding, or whether it was supposed to go beyond that.
Sorry, Baxter, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Baxter, what's your Gmail?
Baxter B94.
There we go. Okay, you should be good. I'll try.
Yep.
Okay, dope. Could you repeat that?
Okay, so for this guide training funding criteria, in chapter 3, there are these various priorities for funding. And my question was whether it was supposed to just be a guide that kind of restates these in a way that's more accessible to students, or whether it was supposed to be adding on to that, or yeah.
So the priorities and the viewpoint neutrality are similar but different. So the priorities is more like how do we gauge how this specific program or budget plan will impact the university, and there are like certain priorities by which to like assess that. Viewpoint neutrality is like how do we compare the way that we're weighing those priorities for this budget request in the grand scheme of all the budget requests. And so I don't know if I'm making myself clear. Like the priorities are separate in the sense that they're used to help determine like what specifically to look at within a budget request when like determining like how much to fund and like how like important is this program to the university. But viewpoint neutrality is like, okay, like so viewpoint neutrality looks at making sure that those priorities are applied equally across all budget requests. I guess is what I'm saying. And if that's not clear enough, then maybe it's just a result of redundancy. But I think that's the difference that I make in my head.
Yeah, I see a difference between those two categories. I'm just not really clear then on what the guide is supposed to be, whether it's supposed to be different from what's already in the code.
It's just supposed to be like a more comprehensive outline. Maybe it combines viewpoint neutrality and the priorities. I think the reason we wanted to create the guide was just because there was a lot of not ignorance, but like just like willful overlooking of neutrality and like of like the priorities and stuff when a lot of these requests are being heard. And so we just wanted to like make it clear to everybody in the committee that like this is like an itemized list of how to look at each request, and how to make sure that like, you're being neutral when looking at those requests, and how to hold each request like the same standard.
So is the idea for that to be a guide for the committee instead of a guide for the students who are applying?
Oh, yeah. It's a guide for the committee. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, it's a guide for the committee, not for the students applying. It's like for the committee, for the senators as they're hearing the requests. And then the priorities for funding are more geared towards the students themselves to like help like gauge like help gear their budget plan towards something that like is ensures that the finance committee will look upon it like positively and be like, okay, like this like benefits the university.
I have a question and then a possible follow-up question based on the answer of that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So then if this guide is going to be something that's used for a long-standing, like if it's kind of going to become a standing document, is it something that's the intention is to, my understanding is like remove individual discretion in decisions?
It's not to remove individual discretion, it's to ensure that like, it's to ensure that when senators are, okay, so it's not to remove discretion, it's to remove bias. Those
okay, yeah. That's like generally what I meant, like individual discretion was the idea of like introducing bias. I think then it might be something, because if it's like a newer thing that we're going to use for a while in Senate, like as a longstanding document, it might be something that could be explored with offices like Dean of Students or EOC office, just because the point is to remove bias from it, that I think that they might be a help in having a more like comprehensive hand and understanding what's going to move that individual bias, if that makes sense.
That's fair, we can do that. It's a good idea.
Mm-hmm.
Ashna, we're currently discussing chapter 2.
Okay, I can speak freely, right? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, we're in committee.
All right, awesome. So you're saying like basically, as I jumped in, this is what I heard. The guide should be shared with like a different office. Which offices do you want to like share it with?
So I was thinking of it in the sense that I guess to like compare this out to some things, when I think of what this guide is, it sounds a little bit like not necessarily a rubric, but the idea of how like committees like hardship parking or like committees that I work on, like affordability committee, to make sure that there's not a whole lot of bias or like bias discretion in decisions of funding, that it might be valuable to work with like dean of students and equal opportunity and compliance office, just to ensure that it's a comprehensive document that's thinking about bias in a sense that's like addresses implicit biases along with explicit biases.
I definitely agree. A little background to like why we included this. In previous sessions, when we had finance committee and we'd go over like different applications on funding days and like presentations, um, it used to be that we would be like, oh, like this is a $200 request. That doesn't matter as much. You know, it's fine. We'll pass it. Versus something that's a little bit more, maybe like 2 or 3,000. So this is kind of like, you know, adding that point of neutrality back in where you have to look at each one with the same criteria. So I definitely agree with you.
Okay, cool.
I was wondering if that could be better incorporated into the standing rules of the finance committee. If it's mostly intended for the way the committee is run, then that wouldn't just be a guide, it would actually be a rule for how the committee would have to operate.
I think I agree with Baxter on that.
I definitely agree too. I think the point of having it as a guide as well is to have something that committees or rather organizations can look at. So it's more like a physical like manual of everything funding the funding processes.
Oh, oops. I definitely said the other thing earlier. My bad.
It's okay, Keisha.
Is there an existing doc for the finance committee standing rules?
I haven't found one.
Committee standing rules were added to the code this past session, so there aren't existing committee standing rules, so we need to create those by the fall.
Oh, good. Okay.
All right.
I have one more question about this piece of this certain bill that I think Ashna, you might be able to answer now that you're here. When we're looking at the last section, E and F that are scratched from it, do you think that, excuse me, removing those two as obligations would potentially remove any kind of conversation or like working relationship with those committees and you as the finance chair?
Okay, so clarification. So we're taking E and F off because the finance chair just doesn't sit on those committees anymore. And rather the people who sit on them are from exec branch and specifically like the treasurer, the president, and then GPSF president and the finance chair for GPSF. So that's why we're just taking it off because it's not accurate.
Okay, so that's just like a technical correction.
Mhm.
Okay, so then is that I guess I'm like confused. Is there supposed to be like an existing relationship between finance chair and those groups now, or no?
No.
Okay, cool. Never mind. Then that answers my question. Thank you.
So just to clarify that a little bit more, SFAS and TFAT are two of the higher up rungs on the ladder of student fees at UNC. So the finance chair still sits on SFAC along with me, which is like the bottom rung of that ladder. But as you go higher up, it like involves more like administration and like the SVP versus like the Senate people.
If there isn't any other discussion, I'll take a motion on this bill.
Baxter, did you add in the amendment that you wanted to make?
Yes, I did. Oh, yeah. So Ashna, we were discussing the part about who could apply for secondary appropriations, and we were talking about amending it so that the just to say organizations that have received funding in the primary subsequent appropriations period would not be eligible to apply. We didn't want to make that amendment without you present to comment on it.
No, I agree with that amendment. I didn't include it at first, but it was something I talked to Keshav about for bringing up if I couldn't make this meeting.
So the debate was if we wanted it to be clubs who received funding or clubs who didn't apply for funding.
I think it's okay if we leave it clubs who received funding, because if they applied for funding but then something happened and they couldn't actually give their presentation or they didn't receive any money, I don't want to restrict them to like not apply for the second one.
To me.
I'll propose an amendment to add right here, if you all can see my cursor, to say student organizations that received funding in the subsequent appropriation period shall not be eligible to apply.
Second.
My question is just, do you add it here? Is this the best spot to put that? That's just a question. I don't like later bills or later chapters rather, they're separate bills, more so describe the funding cycles.
We could, so I think the best options would either be to try and table this bill and then we can come back to it, and like once we've gone through the other ones, if we haven't found a better place to make that change to another bill, we could come back to it and do it in this bill, or we can pass this bill as it is, and if we don't find a better place to make that change, we can make it in full Senate.
We can table it for now if I think that's a better option.
Okay, I'll take a motion or discussion.
I was also just looking, and I think Bill 14 is a better place to add it in than here. So
Would it just be a motion to table this bill for now? Or is it like something different that we would process that we would say?
Yeah, we can, yeah, that works.
Okay, well, I guess motion to table the bill for now.
Okay, is there a second?
That motion.
All those in favor? Say
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, this bill has been tabled. So we'll move on to chapter 3. Austin, if you want to talk about what's in this bill.
Right, let me just. Okay, so this bill specifically talks about like priorities and general guidelines for each kind of like funding day and like how we're supposed to rank everything. So typically when we listen to presentations, we rank like how many of the student body it represents or something like that. And so this bill this chapter rather, within the bill, just outlines all that. So there were 2 separate sections that specifically defined guidelines. And what we did is we got rid of one of the sections and instead placed it in a previous section. So they're not separated. And instead it's more clear. So it's just one big section. That's section 300. And then past that, I think this bill also has the restrictions category. Yeah, that's just changing section numbers. We can't do that salary wages thing anymore on our own. It's more complicated, which is why we changed it to just refer to SLL. And for wages, those are the only positions that are paid by us, and they can't really have a raise. It's just a kind of a flat rate stipend. And other than that, the last thing in this bill should be restrictions. So specifically with 8 and 9, that was firearms and weaponry. And since it was a little bit complicated in that like our code kind of did not go with university policy, we just changed it so that you just have to refer to student safety and security because they'll have the most updated rules based on the purchase of firearms and weaponry, which is why we changed that. We also got rid of retroactive funding because it's a pain, and now we have like 5 funding cycles, so it shouldn't be a big deal.
So then under restrictions was part 8. I think I understood what you were saying, but just to clarify, it just basically takes any discretion from finance committee and gives it to the student safety and security committee.
Mhm.
Okay.
And you're raising the limit on capital expenditures here? Or
Yeah, so that's
raising
just to go with university policy.
Okay.
So it's just to align that.
Is this saying that we can't pay for phones anymore?
Yeah, we're just not allowed to.
Okay, any questions or discussion? I don't think there's anything controversial in here. I think this is mostly just changes that either needed to be made because of university policy or moving the, actually, no, that's not true. I did have one question. For this section, it looks like previously when this section and section 302 were separate, these were in no particular order, section 302. And now this one says that they're listed in descending order of priority.
Right.
Was that an intentional change?
That was not intentional. I'm trying to see how we can word that best. The idea is that like priorities and guidelines are kind of the same thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it is in descending order for section 300. So is there a way to list 1 through 4 as subcategory to something else? Like these criteria are listed in descending order as 1, and then what is right now as 1 through 4 as subcategories of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we could just put this as number 1 and then all of these as like A through D.
Yep.
I think. Does it still preserve the meaning?
Yep, yeah.
That order is one of the criteria? Was that what we're trying to say?
1 through 4, yeah, that's like the previous order. So just like carrying that over for 1 through 4 and then just leaving the rest not really organized by order.
Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that it's still it's easy to understand. We're making a distinction between one of those aren't really criteria in the same way, right? It's more like it is really just one of the criteria is, have we funded all of our constitutionally obligated funding, and so on. So I'll go ahead, Ashna. I assume that's a friendly amendment.
Yeah,
I'll go ahead and make that change, and then we can see if it still makes sense.
okay.
So should we change this? Should we change that line to say something else? I guess is my question. So something like the following types of requests should be funded in this order of priority or something like that.
That, I think that makes a little bit more sense. Just to see how it looks, I deem that friendly. So putting a sentence that looks something like that.
Or maybe we should even say like these types of requests instead of criteria here. These categories of
Or I would say types of requests.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other discussion on this bill? Hearing none, I'm open to the motions.
Wait, do you guys read through the whole thing? Like scroll all the way down.
Yeah, we did before. I can go through it again.
Gotcha.
If nobody else has any other questions, I'd motion to report the bill favorable.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this bill is being reported favorably. All right. Number 14. Ashna, I'll let you introduce this one.
Yeah. Okay. So this specifically outlines, so we used to have a required meeting every year. So basically, student organization treasurers would have to meet with me. I believe the speaker has to be in attendance. Yeah, the treasurer, me, and the speaker. And we would have sort of a workshop of types to let them know about the funding cycle. But this year, as you know, that will not happen. And other years for which like that can't happen, instead, we've tried to change it to a training. So the treasurer's test that everybody has to take, in kind of our idea is to make that a training of sorts where like you'll actually learn about all the funding process while you're taking the treasurer's test. Which is why we changed the word from meeting to training there. We made the request submission period longer from 24 to 48 hours. So it gives organizations more time to submit it. And also we kind of like put a hardcore date down in terms of having it open on the first Friday after the first day of class. So that's like just the same every semester and every year. Sub-organizations have to apply through their parent organization, so we don't get like 5 different requests. For example, like Campus Y has a bunch of subcommittees that are sub-organizations technically. And so we don't get like all of the subcommittees requests plus the parent committee, which is Campus Y. So that can be the same for like exec branch if like they have a committee that they want to apply for, but they all just do it at once. 404, so because we're getting rid of retroactive funding and we wanted, and this is just a terrible system, essentially, like it used to be that you separate the requests in 4 categories based on the amount that they're requesting. We don't want to do that anymore because some organizations are heard after their event or after they need funding for something, and then it just doesn't make sense because we got rid of retroactive funding. So this is open to better wording, but essentially we're just like, it's up to me and the finance committee essentially, well the code says me, but also finance, to decide in what order the requests are going to be heard. And we're going to add on a question within the like within the actual application for dates that they'd need funding by. So like it's more event based. Also for this bill, we want to add that you can't apply for funding for the secondary if you didn't get it, if you got funding in the first subsequent, but also is there a way to put, I'm thinking of a place to put a cap because we want to cap the amount that you're allowed to request for subsequent and secondary subsequent. And that cap, I think, for if Keshav has anything else, but we were thinking about more like 20 to 25,000 for the subsequent, but then for secondary, smaller amounts. So like capping it at 1,500. I think that's about it.
Where would you insert those pieces at in the bill, in this bill that you mentioned?
I'm gonna look at it myself and see.
It'll also be a new section.
We could just do that.
So would that be able to encompass the caps that you mentioned, but also what we discussed in, I think, 12 or USB 102.12 for tabling, where it was about subsequent and then the secondary ones, who can apply and who can't? Would those all be in the same section?
We could say it like restrictions of funding periods or something like that.
Yeah, I was just thinking, I think I like that idea because it consolidates it best in one place for someone to see instead of scattering it through different pieces, because they have, I don't want to say it's like a I like really do not have words today. It's not like a punishment section, but it's like if you miss the first one, like the opportunities aren't the same. So I think putting those in the same place are good.
I agree. I think having a separate section for both of those exceptions, or not really exceptions, but more like restrictions, is a better idea.
So would we not want to put it under section 403 here, which also has, like, we're adding this restriction about sub-organizations, and we're adding, or it already has things about like the other requirements for the organization, what they're supposed to submit.
Wait, that actually makes sense to put in 403.
Can we put both of them in 403?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I think it's because it's like a requirement to be heard, that your request can't be for more than however much money, and you can't request in the secondary if you've already received money.
Yeah, I agree. We could have it as kind of a sub bullet point, if that makes it more clear.
Um, so do we like the way this is organized, or do we want to? Would we want to just put those rules about the request in a different into subsections, or would we want to change anything else to make it easier to read?
If we add those two other points, do you want to make the highlighted portion that's already there also a subsection? So then it's kind of like each restriction is like an A, B, and C.
Yeah. So I'll offer an amendment to say request for funding must comply with the following rules, or I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, I agree.
Requests. Yeah, I'm not quite there.
I'll second your amendment.
I wish I knew what it was. Unless we just wanted to add those as different numbers, like make this one number 2, and then add another one for number, like add a new 3 and 4, because this part already says requests shall be considered as follows, and so
Right, and they're not even going to be kind of considered if. I like that idea better.
I agree.
so I would make that number 2, and then for number 3 I would the organizations that received funding in the subsequent appropriations shall not be eligible for the secondary subsequent.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to discussion on how much that cap should be for each. We originally talked about more like, I think the biggest requests we get are, I want to say like 25 or 26,000. So the idea was that in the first one, we'd have something close to that, but then in the second one, we'd cap it at smaller requests, so they're more like event-based requests. Also, it's unlikely that they're gonna spend more than like 1,500 post October.
I have to bounce down. I'll see you all later. Adios.
Yeah, I'm open to suggestions on or whatever you think is best. Nasha, I don't have a good sense of what those would what makes sense to go there.
I'm gonna say 25,000 for the subsequent, and then 1,500 for the secondary. Yeah.
Like 1,500 would be the max you could get for the second round of funding, right?
Yep.
Like even if, okay.
So like you can't apply for more than 1,500, so you could get 1,500, you could get lower than that. If you
Right.
you apply for lower, you can also get up to 1,500.
What's the, no, okay, that makes sense. I was just thinking like, if, when is the first round of funding? Like what is the date like during the year, like when the first round of funding happens?
So this year it would be August 14th, I think is the first Friday. And so it would open August 14th at 5, close August 16th at 5, and then right after that, I sort the requests, and the next finance meeting is day 1 of funding requests, or funding cycle days, whatever, the days that we hear it.
Yeah, I think 1,500 makes sense.
All right. I'd like to discuss this section 405 and the process, just making, if we're getting rid of the high, medium, and low categories, then does it make sense to just say they should be, right? If it's just depending on urgency,
Mhm.
then shouldn't the order of the of the request be based on urgency and then be randomized within that?
Yes. Yeah.
Um,
So I think
uh,
A just has to be changed, and then the first sentence of B for section 405.
So I would request or suggest, if we're not going to worry about the amount of funding at all, which I think is your goal, it's just based on urgency, then I would suggest collapsing section 404 and 405 into one section and making it like we could make this part section A of 405, and then the order within each, and instead of basket, change it to category.
I agree with that.
All right. Does that look okay to everybody?
Yeah, and we don't have to fix section numbers now, I guess.
I'm pretty sure those can be fixed after the bill is passed, even when it's being integrated into the code.
Mhm.
Okay. Any other comments on this bill? Any other sections?
Nope.
Any motions?
I guess I don't know whether I guess I just have a question. Do you think it's at this point should be reported favorably or without prejudice? Just because I don't know. Like I think we just figured out a lot of stuff, but should we leave it there now or
I think that changing both the changing the way in which funding requests are heard is a relatively large change. So I think it would be worthwhile for the full Senate to hear it.
okay, that's what I thought. So I'll motion to report it without prejudice then.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay, this is being reported without prejudice. Okay, 115. Ashna, go ahead.
That's just doing some like clarification. It's literally just changing the so basically the vice chair just has to keep track of everything we buy based on like what organizations we gave funding to. So it's just changing it to that everything that we buy that is equal to or exceeding the capital expenditure limit, which is the $500. Those are the items that the vice chair would keep a record of.
Okay. Seems simple enough.
If nobody has any questions, then I'll motion to report it favorably.
I'll second that motion.
There's been a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. Reported favorably. Oh. Okay. This is Keshav's bill, and he's not here anymore. So if we want to I'll take a motion to remove USB 102.012 from the table. Since we've made that change elsewhere, we can go ahead and pass this bill, report this bill.
Okay, well, I guess motion to remove it 102.12 from table.
I'll second that
All those in favor?
move.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're all set with this. Given that we made that only change we were waiting on, so I'll take a motion on this bill.
Motion to report favorably.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? Okay, this bill has been reported favorably. Okay. So that's all of our finance code bills. So thank you, Ashna, for your work on that. And now we have this bill from Keshav about the training requirements in the student code. So this bill, since he's not here, I'll just give you a quick overview if you haven't read it. This bill changes the encouragement of the following trainings to a requirement, and now you have the whole term instead of just your first semester. It also adds a racial equity or bias training. But you can get out of this requirement if you've completed a similar training or one of those trainings already. And my one point of confusion is that you have to complete at least one each semester. So I don't know whether that means you have to, I don't know how that fits with, does that just mean they want you to space it out, or does that mean that you have to attend at least one even if you have completed a similar training already? I'm not exactly sure how that works.
Yeah, so I can speak to that as
Sure.
I'm one of the co-sponsors on it. So when we talked about it, the idea was because the concerns in the first place that were raised from the other people that co-sponsored it, along with myself and Keshav as the sponsor, they were concerned about it being a lot for senators to handle at once. So the idea was that it would be split ideally, like you would do 2 per semester instead of having to overwhelm somebody with all 4 in a semester. I don't know if it's like, if that included is the best language to present that, but I guess it was just that it's like an accountability metric for the fact that you're doing it, but also not holding them to all having to be done at once, if that makes sense. And I think that there could be a better way to phrase that. I'm not positive on how we would do that, because if it's I see your point of like, if you've already done those trainings, like that language makes it seem like you'd still have to do one per semester, I guess. So I don't know how we would rephrase that, but I see that concern.
Essentially, we want to word it so like it doesn't make it seem like we have to do each one twice, right?
Yes.
Maybe until a senator has met this requirement, they shall be required to complete at least one.
Mm-hmm.
Until a senator has fulfilled the requirement.
Yeah.
And one of the ways to fulfill the requirement would be to submit a request to mark it as complete.
Yeah, I agree, because I think especially if you're someone that comes in and like, say you've already done 3 of these and you do the last one your first semester, you have nothing to do for another semester. So I think that language works well for that.
Okay, so that would just be here until
The only other part in this that I would like to add something to, I think this Title 1, Chapter 1, Section 119 isn't strong enough as it is. I think there needs to be a similar provision to how senators are required to complete all 4 of them, but they have their entire term instead of like there. I don't think that this gives enough like clarity on the time constraints it has, and I also don't think it places an accountability metric of like these have to be completed at least one per semester, if that makes sense. Because I agree with that. I think cabinet members should have to do these, but I think we need to include the provision from A, B, and C. Also, actually, maybe like A, B, C, D, and I just think A, B, C, D should probably be transferred to the executive branch somehow, because I know in the executive branch, I believe it's the chief of staff. That doesn't matter like who specifically it is in executive leadership, but they organize them and encourage people to attend. But I think if we codify it as it's a requirement, we should codify A through D for the executive branch too.
so should we so perhaps we should just add, like, make this a
Yeah, I see what you're doing. I agree. I think just make it like completely mirror what A through D is for Title 2, Chapter 5, Section 513, but just change the language for cabinet members instead of senators.
so should this say during their term?
Yeah, because for cabinet members, the term is about, it's a little bit different than Senate. It's usually about like April to April. Mm-hmm.
And then sorry.
No, you're good.
Um, to the undergraduate secretary.
And then also at the beginning of that, it would be if a cabinet member instead of if a senator.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Or should we keep that and say including which
Appointed.
Yeah, appointed.
And this is just another thought. Sorry, never mind. The thought just left my head as soon as I started talking. Yeah, I thought of something and then it's immediately gone. Sorry.
Okay. So did you want to include D as well?
Yeah, I think so. Because executive board, which is, I guess, like their leadership, I don't know, executive branch has so many tiers of leadership within it, honestly. But that's like they're similar to our Senate leadership would be exec board.
So do we want to codify that
Yes,
they have to organize one?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
And then I guess to replace Senate leaders, you could say executive board. Because like I said, that's kind of their skew. And I think like leaving it to just cabinet would be too chaotic because there's like almost 35 people in cabinet or something like that.
Is that like, do we usually say EVO or something in the?
Yeah, that's what EBO is exec board.
But is that how the code says it?
Oh, I'm not sure. I can look to see if I see it in there. That's a good question. I don't think it says EBO. I did it like Control F and didn't find it. So the code refers them as undergraduate student body officers, I think.
Yeah, I think we want to clarify that to just say executive branch officers. I see that in the code as well.
Okay, that makes sense. That's a good catch. Yeah, I guess executive board is just a name that they like adopted for themselves.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Or yeah, I don't know.
And then I guess I remember the thought that I had earlier. This might be a question when this is in full Senate for when members of executive board or like executive branch officers are present. Is an A the language of all cabinet members? I'm not sure if that includes the executive board. So like secretary, vice president, director of state and external affairs. That would be a question when they're actually there because I don't know like technically how that structure falls. I think cabinet member might just insinuate just committee co-chairs and not like the actual officers. So that might have to be language we change once we can clarify that with them, unless we just want to preemptively change it, and then if we have to fix it. Because to me, under the code, it looks like in Title I, cabinet members is only committee co-chairs.
I don't know where I am exactly, but there's an Article 2 cabinet, and it says Section 110. It's on page 11.
Yeah.
Cabinet shall consist of all executive branch officers.
Okay, I didn't see that. Okay, thank you for that.
And then
So that works then. That was just something I wasn't sure, like how they broke down the structure, because I feel like executive board is more loose with like colloquially referring to different positions as different things. This is just something random that will have to be fixed in the future that I've seen, is that under Article 2, this isn't every single cabinet position. There's at least, just looking at this, there's at least 3 committee co-chair positions that are missing from here. So that's just like a technical correction we'll have to make at some point.
That are codified?
Yeah, so in Article 2, Section 110, it's missing. So as far as being codified, the Affordability Committee is not codified, the Arts Committee is not codified, and the First Year Focus Council is not codified either.
But executive branch considers them cabinet members?
Yes, because I serve as affordability co-chair, and that's not codified, but that I think affordability co-chair has been around since the Putnam administration, which was like 2 years ago, I think. But I'm pretty sure that like those committees are at cabinet meetings. So that might be something that we check with them too, but I'm pretty sure that would be codified.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that, like, I don't think we would just want to add it to Section 110.
Yeah.
Without adding it somewhere else.
I agree, because there's a few different places that it's missing. So, well, if you look at it, so the Affordability Committee is codified in Section 118 as having responsibilities, but it's not codified in 110.
Oh, okay.
And then we would also just have to check, this might be something that I can check with them, is whether they want like the Arts Committee and the First Year Focus Council to be codified, because I know that those are like serving committees within cabinet, but I don't see them within Title I. That's like a tangential discussion, so I'm sorry.
That's a good thing to know about. I'd be happy to talk more with you about that later, or if you want to reach out to executive branch, you can definitely look into that.
Yeah, I can do that. That was like tangential, but I assumed that would be important when we talk about like what cabinet members have the responsibility of attending these trainings.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay. I don't have anything else to add to it, so.
All right. If you have anything, feel free to add it. Otherwise, I'll take a motion on this bill.
Do a motion to report favorably.
Is there a second?
I think I would just motion to report it without prejudice.
Okay. There's been a motion to report without prejudice. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor of reporting without prejudice, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Great. Well, that concludes our agenda. So I have no notices or announcements. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, I say
Second.
yes. Jay?
Yep.
Say yes.
Yes.
Colin?
Yes.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you for your work today, y'all. That was
Great. Thanks, Baxter.
good job. See y'all later.